Okay, so let's talk about some of the bulky stuff other than clothes that's going to be in your luggage with you. Again, I'm talking about adventure and dual sport riding, majority off pavement, and camping off the bike. Most people tend to start with a tent for that option. You might see videos, whatever, on people hammock camping. If you're familiar with it, great. If not, just know that a hammock setup in the heat of summer might be just fine to get started with. If you're going to be in the cooler times, spring and fall, or it's going down to 40 at night in June or whatever in the upper northern sections of the United States or whatnot, you might just know that you're probably going to want to test that out, because getting your sleep system right with a hammock is a little more complicated than a tent. A little bit more involved. I've been hammocking for years for various activities, and I love it and prefer it. But for purposes of this particular video, I'm just going to show you basically from a tent perspective. So, speaking of that, this is my tent. Again, I'm not going to talk about specific brands. Bring a tent. Don't forget your poles, your stakes, any other accessory items that you need there. Make sure you have it. I like to have it in a bag that's somewhat waterproof, because if it gets wet and it's going in with my luggage, I like to keep the water contained just so it stays off the rest of my stuff. Because we're in a tent, inflatable sleeping pad. Some people start out by going to a department store and buying one of those yoga mats. They're about 3/4 inch thick solid foam. They don't really compress. They roll up. They're easily that long and about this big around. It's actually a really good option for a lot of types of adventure, kayaking, backpacking, to start with, because they're super cheap. Only problem is they're big and bulky, so on a motorcycle it's a little annoying. If you already have panniers on the side of your motorcycle and you put that on top, it won't stick out more. If you don't, it's going to stick out a lot, and that will be the thing catching trees, and might get knocked off the bike, or just might frustrate you a little bit. I prefer to go with a smaller inflatable. Deal with that. Sleeping bag. Quick note on sleeping bags. Highly recommend you get yourself a waterproof compression sack to put it in. The bags that come with them tend not to be waterproof. They might be water resistant at best. They're definitely not sealed well. If this gets wet, you are going to be in a world of hurt if it is cold when you get to camp. This needs to stay dry, so I prefer it to be in some kind of waterproof container. You can obviously cheat and use garbage bags. Trash compactor bags are pretty popular, that sort of thing. It won't help compress it. It does work though. Only problem is on a really long trip, there's a lot of shifting around of gear inside of a motorcycle as it vibrates down the trail and going over whoops and all that. That can wear holes in that plastic very quick. And all it takes is one hole for that sleeping bag to get wet, and then you're not going to be happy. So, brings me to this. This is a chair with a back on it. This is not a required item. This is a luxury item. On my GS, doing adventure type rides, I bring this every time. It was already a big fat cow, over 500-pound bike, so putting this on wasn't a big deal. Lightweight, dual sport. This is something I have to think about as to whether I really want it. Short trips, I might not bring it. Trips where I'm motel hopping, this isn't coming at all, because in an emergency camp situation, this just isn't important enough. But riding off-road for all day, my back starts to get sore a little bit, probably because I have terrible posture and I'm aging, but if your back gets sore, having a chair with a back on it that when you get to camp you can set up, sit down, and lean your back into is fantastic. Especially if you're not hammocking, you're going to want that. If you have a hammock, well, then you can just sit in that, lay in that, and be more comfortable than anyone's going to be on the ground anyway. Also, quick note on tent versus hammock. If you're in an area like Michigan, Pennsylvania, anywhere where there's just trees everywhere, hammocking is fantastic, because you always have an option within a short distance of finding some great trees to hang from. That's not an option everywhere. So that's the other reason I'm showing tents. One other quick note, for a ground cloth for your tent, or even if you're not tenting, if you're going hammock, something to lay underneath of that so you can actually put your gear on, get a piece of Tyvek. It's super cheap. Don't buy the footprint for your tent. If you're going out to buy a tent for yourself to do adventure motorcycle riding or dual sports type riding where you're camping off the bike, just get a piece of Tyvek. This stuff is cheap. You can get it in various sizes on Amazon now for a reasonable price. It's pretty much waterproof. Weighs nothing. Use it as a sit pad to sit on. You gotta set it on a log so you don't get your butt wet when you sit down. You can put it on the ground to set your gear on. If you're working on the bike, you can drop this on the ground, drop it in oil. It doesn't matter. It's like $4. Throw it away at the end of your adventure if you want. But quite frankly, it lasts a really long time. I'm still on the first one I ever bought. It's fantastic for all of those uses. That covers the majority of the camping approach. Just have a solution and test your solution before you go on a 7-day ride camping trip. Make sure you know how to set up your tent or your hammock. Make sure you know if you're going to be warm. Go into your backyard and sleep when it's 30 degrees outside. See what it takes to actually stay warm in that. And don't just lay in it for 5 minutes and then say, yeah, this feels warm enough. Because you get the coldest really late in the evening, early morning. Make sure you make it all the way until the sun comes up. Because around 2 or 3, if you wake up freezing and shivering and need to run into the house, your sleep system isn't adequate. Now imagine that you're wet. Now it's even worse. Which brings me back to the sleeping bag, by the way. A little pet peeve I have. Sleeping bags have ratings. This is a 32-degree bag right here. What that means, the rating on a sleeping bag, is you might not die at that temperature. Maybe not. You're not going to be comfortable. If a sleeping bag is rated for 30 degrees, I like to add 10 degrees. That's about the threshold of where I'm still going to be comfortable at best. So a 30-degree bag for me means 40 degrees. Anything more than that, and I have to bring some additional layers of warmth or some other solution to deal with the situation. If I'm in a hammock, I'm going to bring my full-length under quilt. That's rated higher. I might even throw a pad in it if it's going to drop to 0, though that's not for motorcycle trips for me. I don't deal with ice. So keep that in mind. Test your gear. It's very, very important. I'll go over some more of the gear when I get back.